Hey everybody, hope you can hear me. I'm Chip Longnecker. I'll be the sort of coach for this evening's session, about 5 tips for the case interview. We'll get started here probably in the next 20 or 30 seconds. Let a few more people come in. Couple ground rules. I'll probably go through a lot of the content today. But number one, feel free to stop me at any moment, and I probably will awkwardly hear something and be like, did someone try to ask me a question? Just because it would, I love questions. It'd be great for you to stop me. And also come off camera if that moves you. I would love to kind of see some folks. And we'll get started here in a second. Alrighty, let's dive in. Can everybody see my screen? Just maybe give a thumbs up in the chat. Feels like we're good. Okay, thanks, Amanda. Awesome. So, my name's Chip Longnecker. I live in Chicago. I'll go through my background here in a second. Tonight's topic is called the 5 secrets of the case interview. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. I love case interviews, and so I'm excited to kind of dive in this with everybody here. So a little bit about me. I live in Chicago. I'm 37. I had 2 kids. We just put them down to bed. I worked for 6 years before going back to get my MBA at Kellogg. I interned at Bain, and then I spent 3.5 years after Kellogg at Bain. Then I did some consumer entrepreneurship stuff, and now I launched a venture capital firm called Tonic Ventures, invest in consumer products. But I still very close to Bain, and my what brings me to sort of management consulting training. I interned at Bain at Chicago, so I went through the entire case interview prep. I know the podcast, the math, all the case books. I was 3.5 years as a consultant manager and senior manager. I know the job. And the reason we do the case interview is because it mirrors the job quite well. And then I led some case interviewing back at University of Michigan, University of Virginia. And I've been coaching on the platform for 2+ years and have helped a bunch of people get jobs at McKinsey, Bain, BCG, etc. So, like I said, really just weirdly passionate about it because I think it's a great way to interview people. And so let's dive in. So quick overview of a case structure for folks that, may not be as familiar. We probably have a range of different familiarity levels in here. Overall, and I'm talking mainly from like a Bain BCG style case, which is sort of interviewer led versus interviewee led versus interviewer led. The typical case will be about 30 minutes. And that'll be kind of 3 main phases. First, 8 to 10 minutes are what's called the case start. That's where the interviewer will deliver the prompt. You might ask some questions. You probably will take some time to develop a framework. And then you'll sort of walk through the framework and we'll begin the case. At that point, it will probably give you an exhibit, at which point we'll spend some time going through the insight to that exhibit. I'll give you another exhibit. We'll go through some more insight. We'll probably do some math in the back third of the case, and then you'll deliver a recommendation and close out. So think of it as 3 8 to 10 minute phases, and then kind of a minute or two to close out. The start of the case is super important, and a lot of times with my coaching clients, we focus on it because number one, it's your first impression, so it's good to sort of start out energetic and developing that rapport. And number two, the same way that you might approach if anybody's the GMAT or other time standardized tests, you want to sort of make sure that you're continuing on in a timely manner because you want to get through all the questions. And so basically you don't want to linger too much at the start of the case because there's going to be high value things to do at the end of the case. So, I know that the title of this program was called I think the top 5 secrets. There's a few more, and I'm quite literally an open book for all of the secrets. So again, we'll talk about 7 secrets here. Feel free to interrupt me, ask for more, message me after the class with any questions you might have. I will tell you all of the secrets. So first secret, how you think about what a case interview is matters, especially for your frame of mind. Secret 2, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Absolutely not. We've been solving case interviews for 30 years now. Secret 3, over communicate, over communicate, over communicate, even when you think it's awkward. Secret 4, timing matters. We just touched on that. Secret 5, they don't just care about quantitative skills. They want to see you be creative. And then a few bonus secrets, which we'll get to at the end. Any questions before we dive into the first secret? Okay. So the first secret, how you think about what a case interview matters. And this is sort of, a little bit of an interesting thought, but I get so excited about the case interview and was passionate about giving them when I was at Bain, because it's a unique interviewing path where it's a reflection of exactly how the job will be. You're with another human. We're working through data. We're talking. We're asking questions. It is as close as what you can get on a job in an actual interview format. And so, what do they want to look for? They want to work for people that they can be in a conference room with, where it's easygoing, it's communicative, and also kind of evaluate you from a problem solving perspective, where we in our cases, in our real client work that we do, we use a structured hypothesis driven approach, and that's what we want to be mirrored in the case interview. So for me, I really try to think of this as like they're fun. We're solving a fun business problem with a friend. I really think if you can change your frame of reference and your frame of mind, and it's not this like, it's this, I have to do this case. But it's going to be this really interesting prompt about an industry. Maybe, it could be supercomputing or mining or grocery stores, or it could be all these different things. It could just be 30 minutes of interesting fun with a friend. Try to think about it in different terms than something that you have to do. I would try to as much approach it as a conversation as possible. Use the interviewer. Ask for data. Ask if the math you're structuring is correctly. Ask if you're going in the right direction. We don't work alone. We don't want you to work alone. And so this is, one of the biggest things that I think people underutilize is like really engaging the interviewer and asking them, not only asking them for data, getting their reactions, confirming things, different, all of that is fair game. And then over communicate. We'll get more into this as we go along. But that's key to the job, is talking about where your head is at, so that there's no guesswork involved in client work. Any questions here? Awesome.
I think you have 2 in the chat, Chip. I don't know if you're able to pull it up, or I can read them to you real quick.
Okay. Oh, yep, I see it now. Cool. Let's see. From Deshita, we have how do you build the rapport with the interviewer to go from solving the case studies to solving a fun business problem with a friend? Yeah, I don't mean quite literally be informal as if you're with a friend. Still, obviously, bring a level of formality to the interview. I think I just meant framing in terms of a more positive way, that it's a chore that you have to do. Cool. So secret 2, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. I see a lot of people get stressed about like creating a framework or creating a structure. And it generally creates a huge amount of anxiety for folks in the prep stage. And I just try to dispel that. And, if you work with me, if you probably worked with other coaches, we have a frameworks cheat sheet. We have a document that is all the frameworks that you would ever need for any type of problem. There are set types of problems. There's profitability, there's new market entry, there's new product development, there's growth strategy, there's M&A, the list, there's 5 more, but there's a universe of 10 different types of problem types, and those frameworks are known. and we've been using these frameworks to solve these business problems for the last 30 years. So the ask of you in the case interview is not to divine a new framework out of the ether to solve this problem. That's not what you're asked for. That would actually be weird if you did do that, because there's structured ways to solve this. What we are asking you to do is to infuse that framework, infuse that structure of the building with your own creativity, your own thought about all the different areas that you want to investigate. If it's and we'll get to an example on the next page, but you should be using frameworks off the shelf that should dispel some of the anxiety, and that should free you up in the moment to again infuse the framework with nuanced kind of sub bullets about the topic at hand. And I readily give this document to all of my clients, and it has been working great for them. Let's see. Thomas Ryder asks, how do I balance asking questions and getting feedback on where I am going and how I am going without seeming too needy or rambling? It's a great question. I generally, I think asking, two or three, I've seen it both ways, where some people start to ask all of the time, is this right? Am I going the right direction? Am I on the right path? That's far too much. I think the push there is maybe two or three times throughout, especially the best time is right before you're solving some math, to kind of bring the interviewer in and be like, I'm thinking about solving the profitability of these four options. Do you think that is a good thing to do? That is a confirmatory question that involves the interviewer, allows them to know what you're thinking, and allows you to not go down the wrong path and do a bunch of math that's not needed. So I think there's two or three times that you can kind of confirm that path, but it's definitely not as needy as like, please tell me I'm doing the right thing. Definitely would not approach it in that way. Do you have any preferred email formats to connect with recruiters and consultants to get referrals from? Like template, I guess maybe Ani's asking for templates. I mean, as I've approached recruiting, and sort of going off the secret for a second, but in terms of recruiting and in terms of doing some pre-work before the interviews, I would say sort of reaching out to folks at the firm is great. Just know what that's used for. If you develop one or two relationships with folks at that specific office ahead of the interview dates, that's going to help your resume get picked from the pile, which is great. You want to get that interview in terms of, physically getting an interview. Past that, sort of the networking and all that type of stuff kind of fades to the background, and really what becomes super important is the case, is your fit interview, and sort of maybe some of those pre-relationships you made in the networking phase becomes less important. So hopefully that gives some insight into the networking aspect. And then Needy asks, which of these frameworks would commonly be used to solve a problem that is related to the implementation of a new team or strategy? I think that, there's common ways to solve that new, whether or not it's a new product, a new market, a new team, anything new. We're basically asking ourselves two questions structurally. We're asking, is it worth it? And can we do it? So those are kind of how those problems are structured. Is it worth it? If it was, say, a new product or a new market entry, you might be evaluating the financial metrics of should we do it. If it's a new team or a new strategy, it might not be as financially oriented, but they're still sort of like, well, why are we doing this? Is there a reason that we need to be developing this new team or strategy? And then the can we do it is like, is this feasible? Do we have the capabilities to actually do this new team or new strategy? So I think I would solve that problem in a very similar way as a new product or a new market, which is sort of think about it, is this something we should be doing, and can we actually do it? So just to give you a sense of, this is an example framework. This is one of the cases that we commonly do from the Kellogg book. It's called Oriented Office Supplies. Basically, the aim is to increase the profitability of Oriented Office Supplies. And so really, in any profitability case, you're going to have three core, and we call this I call this second level here the buckets you want to investigate. Think of yourself as rather than think about this framework as thinking you get this framework that you need to structure and all this type of stuff. At the end of the day, it's a business problem. You're Sherlock Holmes. There's things you need to investigate. What are the buckets? What's on your little pad that you're going to investigate as Sherlock Holmes into this business problem? In a profitability case, we either need to reduce the costs, we need to increase the revenue, and then we also need to evaluate marketing competitive factors. And what I put in, below that are what I call sub bullets, which are, we're going to ask for historical profit information. We're going to ask about fixed and variable costs. We're going to ask for price trends, unit changes. All of this should be in every profitability framework. It probably should be, tailored in the sense of if you're in a case about office supplies, you should talk about the price trends of wood and metals and things that are relevant to the office supplies industry. So there's a way to make it not seem so sterile and so rote, but a little bit more tailored to the case at hand. Does all this make does all this make sense to everybody? Check the chat for any more questions. What are the key strategies to ensure my resume stands out and gets shortlisted for interviews? Beyond, certainly I'd probably, beyond writing a good resume, I think the networking does help you get pulled out of the pile. But there it's a quality over quantity. I wouldn't send 30 emails to everybody in the office. I would find 5 people, send them really thoughtful notes, and try to get 1 or 2 to have a conversation with you. And from those 1 or 2, try to form a meaningful relationship with one of them, and then that person is going to be the person that pulls your resume out of the pile. It's always quality over quantity. I wouldn't spam everybody. You're going to end up having not that many high quality relationships. Do you have a framework example when solving an M&A case or a product launch case? I do. Let me just bring up an example here. And you can also get a sense for what the frameworks the frameworks cheat sheet that I use. Any other verbal questions from folks while I bring that up?
Yeah, do you have any tips for showing personality during the case? Especially if it's like a pretty, um, I guess, qualitative and quantitative heavy case where there's just like a lot of stuff you have to do.
Yeah. So the number one biggest way that you can show, like a great way to show personality is like if you can relate it, if you can make an analogy or a metaphor or whatever, to something that you've seen in real life. Like this reminds me of this company that I saw, or my dad was in this industry and so I saw something like that. That's a way to sort of, establish a little bit more of a nuanced connection with the interviewer. I'd say just by relating it to things in the physical world that aren't so abstract in this case. And then I would show, your personality can come through really, and it'll be one of the secrets that we talk about is creativity. When we get into, there'll be some moments in the case where we're brainstorming together. We might be talking about the biggest cost areas for a company, and I might say, well, what do you think the 5 biggest cost areas are for this company? Let's brainstorm it together. As part of that brainstorming, I want to see you, think about creatively, the business model and the different activities that they might be doing and how that might contribute to cost. And so I think the more that I see the creativity, the more that I maybe see you relating it to things in the physical world, the more that I feel a connection to you or understanding of your personality. And then from Alice, we had, how do you respectfully ask for a referral without coming off the wrong way? Is it rude to ask for a referral? I would probably, yeah, wouldn't, the way that you sort of frame the question, I think it's coming off a little bit more transactional. I mean, I would approach it as, trying to understand the job, the networking aspect of me, and this is real. Like I had no idea, like even though I recruited and, on some level, I had no idea what the day-to-day work was. So I think that's a really honest and genuine way to come at those conversations, which is like, take me through in the day in the life. Like, what are you actually doing? Like, what are you using Alteryx? Like, are you crunching data? Like, how are you actually contributing to the team and to the answer? And I think if you come at it with that authentic and genuine curiosity, you're going to end up forming a deeper relationship with that person, and then also increasing the life. So it's kind of counterintuitive. By actually not focusing on the referral at all and just being genuinely curious about the job, you're gonna probably end up in a better place. So real quick, this is sort of the framework cheat sheet. Kind of have different case prompts in here: new product development, pricing optimization, growth strategy, M&A, and then go to market, which means how do you sort of bring a product to market, or otherwise known as marketing strategy. I think the question in the chat was about M&A. I would think about that as, separate from the price. Is the company even attractive? So we want to understand things like its market position, how much customer concentration it has, barriers to entry, sort of similar to the Porter's 5 Forces model, if anybody on the line knows that. But everything has a price, right? The business could be attractive, but if they want $1 trillion for it, that's not going to be as attractive. So then we need to evaluate the price for the business. In any M&A case, they're always going to want you to talk about synergies. If you're acquiring something or putting two things together, there's going to be revenue or cost synergies. That's going to be a buzzword that they're going to be, that should be its own bucket. And then with anything, usually in your framework, the third or fourth bucket is going to be some sort of risks, challenges, other things to consider. And that's certainly the case with an M&A transaction. There could be cultural impacts, there could be competitor responses, there could be a lot of things that happen. And so when I work with clients, I often ask them to sort of, and we use these off the shelf, the frameworks themselves. It's like the outside of the building into which we write the rest of the framework. I'll just try to bring back the deck up. Be back to the deck here. Secret 3, over communicate even when you think it is awkward. Yeah, so the biggest, it's not possible to communicate too much. You're like, oh, am I taught, should I be telling them about what I'm seeing on the exhibit? Should I be telling them about the math that I want to do? It is impossible to over communicate enough, and it's really, really important in the job to, and that's why, again, hopefully you can see the corollaries here. In the actual job, it's really important to communicate. Some of the worst times as a manager is when you haven't been communicating, someone on your team spent 2 days working on the wrong thing or headed in the wrong direction, and you just burned and wait. It was a waste of their time. It was sort of hurtful to the team, and so those can all just be mitigated by really communicating where your head is at, what you're thinking, and where you want to head. And so again, I put on here, it's not just that you solve the case, it's how you do it. And that's 50% of the battle. So your communication style is being evaluated, and they want to know that you can talk about what you're doing, you want to involve others, and you're open to having sort of your point of view shaped. There's a few moments where you can really communicate. The first is in between those insights, right? So say we've gone through an exhibit, we're in a profitability case, we've identified the cost as the problem, bring me into your headspace. What are you thinking? For example, so just to let you know where my head is at, I'm thinking this information is starting to confirm my hypothesis that cost is the issue. All of a sudden, you've just completely zoomed out of the case. You've told me where you're at, and now I feel a lot closer to you and to the answer. So that's one moment. Moment 2, when we're brainstorming. If I say, again, what are the top five? What do you think the top five areas of cost are for this business? Come to me, be like, so let's brainstorm together. Physically get out a piece of paper, start to get your pen, kind of maybe even shimmy over to see, like, kind of if we were physically in the conference room together, we'd be brainstorming. And then the math. The math is super, super vital. And it's often the part where people are the most quiet. And that kind of is what can undo you. So you really want to, number one, before diving into anything, confirm what you want to calculate. And then if you are knowing what you want to calculate, structure it out, talk through all the calculations. I'm doing this times this, I'm dividing by this, and kind of, there's not enough spelling out that you could possibly do. And this is, let me check the chat for some more questions. We've got from Nicholas, do you have any resources of great framework to learn? I'm sure there's other cheat sheets out there. This is just my own thing that I've honed over the years, that I'm sure those things are in every book. Do you know any platform that connect people so we can practice case interview together? Not peer-to-peer. I know Leland's a great place. Obviously, I think there's a lot of great people doing cases on Leland, but I'm not familiar with any peer-to-peer. Yes, I'll be sharing this deck after the session. And awesome. So secret 4, timing matters. We touched on this a little bit up front. There's a lot to get through in a case. It's 30 minutes. It's jam packed. We're solving this fun business problem with a colleague, maybe not a friend. And one of the biggest mistakes that you can get into is taking too much time at the beginning. That's a mistake that you can do in any high stakes format. On the GMAT, my first try took way too long early on, and I had about 1 minute left for 7 questions. Did not go well. You don't want to get into the case interview equivalent of that, which is kind of asking a bunch of questions, rereading the prompt, doing a lot of things at the beginning, which really can screw you up. And especially, you want to finish strong. You don't want to kind of have an end of the case that's sort of petering off because you're rushed for time and you don't quite get through everything. That's a really high value time. It's important how you start the case, and it's important how you end it, and all that comes down to timing. So I wouldn't dilly dally at the start. I'm not now seeing that I wrote the phrase dilly dally. I'm not sure that is still used in the lexicon here, but it basically means, and I see this worse with sort of clarifying questions. People get the prompt, they sort of reread the prompt back to me. That's fine. But asking 4, 5, 6 questions before we even get into doing the framework, it's just taking up too much time. And you should really keep it moving. I'd say start in high value places. A good example of this is a profitability case. I see so many folks get into a profitability case, and the first thing they ask for is information about the market or competitive factors or that sort of thing, which is basically open. That's a massively varied box to open up, and hugely, just it's a tough place to start because there's so many things that could be going on in the market. But the best place to start in a profitability case is understanding the cost dynamics, because those are tangible, those are internal to the company. It's easier to wrap your head around. Asking straight away for something like the market share of different competitors, while it could be valid, it's not a good place to start from a high value perspective, because it's just too wide ranging. I'd say the other place that you can pick up time is in those pivot points. Again, we're coming off an exhibit, and this is a visualization. You're coming off insight 1, you're heading into getting a new piece of the exhibit. Keep it moving. Tell me where you want to go. Ask me for information that you want. If we have these pauses, if we have these areas where I have to be like, so what do you want to do? Where are we going next? That can suck 30 seconds, a minute out of the case. And so really the onus is on you to sort of keep that proactivity. So here you can sort of see, don't waste time with clarifying questions. Pick a high value place to start that's more likely than not to yield a new piece of information. Keep going during those pivot points. Pick a place to go next. And then during math, it's great if you can sort of find those shortcuts. For example, there could be, you're evaluating 4 different options, but there could be a relatively quick shortcut to eliminate 2 out of the 4. So you're not doing full on math for 4 options, but you're only doing math for 2 options. So finding those little ways to shave a little bit of time off the case can be impactful at the end. So we'll check the chat. A follow-up from Akil, a follow-up on the networking answer. You mentioned that we must build a million relationship with one person per office. Isn't that risky considering high attrition rate in consulting? What if the person we built relationship leaves by the recruiting season? Or was your suggestion to only target partners for networking? Not only target partners. I would target, kind of your level or the year above your level. And that's why I would, maybe it's about building more than, if you only have one relationship, then maybe there's some risk to that. Generally, if it's sort of in and around recruiting season, I don't think you run a very high risk of that person, attriting, prior to your resume coming in. So I still think it's a high value thing to do, that quality over quantity, but it could mean, targeting 7 people to get 2 meaningful relationships from that. Jonathan Felix, Raji said, can you share any tips how I can effectively approach ambiguous case where I have limited or knowledge or less data on it? I see a lot of people, and I don't know if this is exactly the question, worry about the industry. Maybe I don't have familiarity with the supercomputing industry, or say it's a case about mining and I've never done mining before. I see a lot of anxiety arising out from not knowing the specific industry and worrying that would trip you up. And I would say, just think about ways to make it analogous to other industries. The best way, even if you're not familiar with something, there is going to be something that is tangential to you that is related to that. So I would find that common ground where maybe like, oh my gosh, this is super ambiguous, I have no familiarity with that at all. I would actually challenge that and say, you probably do have more familiarity than you think. It's just finding out that place next to that where the case is that you can associate with and that you know about, and then that probably has some corollaries into the place that you're solving. So which finance concepts are important to know? It's a good question. I'd say, break even. The break even calculation is important, which is your variable contribution margin over kind of the startup investment. That's a way oftentimes we're calculating, hey, should we spend 100 million to go build this factory, and understanding sort of when is the break even point for something like that. Sometimes you do run into discounted cash flow, or at least understanding that cash flows will be discounted. $1 5 years from now is not worth the same as $1 today. Knowing that, I think we all can appreciate that, but that is important to know in some cases. Maybe not specifically calculating that, but knowing the concept. I think those are the main ones. Thomas said, do you have any recommendations for coffee chats and informational interviews? When you have coffee chats with prospective candidates, what do you like to ask them to ask or talk about? I'd say the number one thing to remember about these people is like, they're kind of, you go to work at Bain because you want to say that you work at Bain. So they like, from a self-conscious, but like they want to have these conversations with you, and they want you to ask about them, and they want just get them talking. Basically, is like, just ask about their work, ask about, how great it is to work at Bain. I mean, the thing that you're going to probably get the most out, like they're going to feel like they have a connection with you if you just get them talking. So asking about their work, the best case they've ever been on, those are good places to start, because you have to know your audience. Like maybe you feel like you're imposing on them, but you're not really imposing on them because they like to talk about themselves. They like to talk about where they work. So they're going to be very open to having these conversations with you. Do you have a specific framework or advice on how to study pricing drills, defining the price of a product, price sensitivity? Thank you. Not a specific framework for that. I feel it'd be unlikely that there's an entire case on pricing. Sometimes it can be an element within a revenue case, but I don't have a specific framework for that, given it's more of a niche or kind of long tail prompt. So secret 5, they want to see your creativity. So yes, the job involves numbers and quantitative and working in Excel and other data platforms. But really, we solve things most elegantly when we also engage the other side of our brains and our creative. And so your ability to do both of those during the case interview will help you massively. And so there's a couple easy places to do this, like we talked about in your framework, in the sub bullets, which are, say you're talking about a variety of different cost levers within the business. Use words and phrases that relate back to the industry in question. Use microchips and R&D if you're talking about the computing industry. Even doing that will put you above 50 to 60% of candidates, because most people just talk about fixed costs, variable costs, and there's nothing about the computing industry. If you just start to talk about microchips, R&D, engineering, software, just using those terms, you will be beating out 60% of the competition. And it's starting to show, that you're connecting to the case prompt. And then find moments, again, we talked about if you can relate it back to something that you've seen or in your personal experience that shows kind of the ability to sort of move very quickly from the case to something else, recall it and bring it back. And so we're always looking for those types of moments. A bonus secret, a really high level tactic that can really kind of set you apart is if you use the framework that you have as a living document. We spend those 2.5, 3 minutes at the start of the case doing a framework, writing it down. What's challenging for candidates is most people just set it aside, it gathers dust, and they never refer back to their framework. That is not the intent. We actively use our frameworks in the real life cases that we're doing, and we're constantly revising them, crossing things off, and it's a living document. If you can embody that spirit in the interview, it's going to put you a leg above. So what does that mean? That means if you find out a piece of information that's helpful, circling it on your framework or checking it off. If you find out something that's not relevant anymore, crossing it off. Keeping the paper out, keeping your framework separate, crossing it off, circling things. And you should always try to go in the order of how you structure your framework. If whatever you have first, think of it as the places you want to investigate. So the places you have first, go first. Like one of the odd things I see in certain candidates is they've done this whole framework. They've told me about this one thing they want to look at, the second thing and this third thing. And then I ask them where do they want to start? And I said, well, let's start with the third thing. That's just kind of random. It's kind of out of left field. Kind of go in a methodical order. And usually the first place that you write down is the first place that you should start to look. So hopefully, let's see, we have another question in the chat. How do you apply this bonus case in virtual interviews? I mean, in virtual interviews, I would still write my framework down on a piece of paper. And like, if I was crossing something out, I would sort of like be visually gesturing to it. I would be as animated as you can. I'd still have my paper. I would still be writing things on it. Nothing will change for me in a virtual interview versus it being an in-person interview. It might limit how much it lands, but again, I'm hopefully trying to convey, I want you to be authentically engaging with your framework, which means if you can actually use it as a guide and you can cross things off and circle things and check things, it's going to make your case go smoother. It's going to make you look like an A+ candidate, and it's going to be, you're going to be all the more better off for it. So the last bonus secret, what are they looking for? I would say they want to, kind of why some of the secrets, I guess, for like, what are those next level things you can do? Like writing, crossing things off on your framework, circling things. They want to see you hit a home run versus kind of have two solid cases. They'd rather see, if you do two cases back to back and I'm with somebody sort of rating the same candidates, if we give somebody an A or an A plus on one case and a B minus on the other, that person's still probably more likely to go through than someone that got two B pluses. And so it's kind of that like swing, trust your instinct, swing for the, swing for the fences. I mean, use the foundational knowledge, but like the more that you can show that A or A plus range, the more likely it is that you're gonna get through. One of my favorite tactics to do that is the sub bullet on the right, ability to zoom out and see the whole problem and then zoom all the way back into the case, sort of perspective shifting in real time in the middle of the case. Something like, let's take a step back for a moment. The client wanted us to solve this thing. Now, 20 minutes into the case, we understand that this factory might be the problem. All of a sudden you've gone out to what's talking about in the boardroom and you brought me back to the case. And that shows just a really, elite level of skills. Raji asked, so last question. I understand that top consulting firms often recruit from targeted individuals as someone from a non-target university. What strategies can I use to enhance my chances of entering these firms? Are there specific approaches that can help overcome this challenge? I think just being persistent with it and trying to develop those one or two relationships. Anything can happen from those one or two relationships within the firm. And just know that the way that they are hiring is more going to be moving more in your directions. They're used to, if you go back 20 or 30 years, they would only hire these people from Harvard and these people from Yale. That's not, there certainly is some semblance of a target versus a non-target today, but they are hiring all year round. They're looking at their people that apply on their portal. It is a much wider funnel intake of applicants than it ever has been in history. And that's only working in your favor. So I'd say keep at it, say keep doing the networking, and just know that the way that their talent practices are moving is in that direction, away from sort of a few target universities and more to a bigger funnel to capture a wider swath of candidates. What are the top two differentiators between an A plus performance versus a B plus? Top two, I would say being creative at some point. Like I want to see you had some elegant shortcut to cut off two things. I also want to see you driving the case. The number one biggest thing that can separate an A plus from an A minus is if I have to draw it out of you. If I have to add like, what do you want to do next? Where do you want to go? What are you looking for? Just take on that onus, take on that initiative, and just kind of trust your gut and your instinct and go to the next thing, go to the next thing. Nicholas asked, I'm still confused on how to state our hypothesis. When should we state our hypothesis? Do we need to state our hypothesis on every root cause that we want to drill down? In some cases, you can state a hypothesis up front. Like, say you've just gone through your framework. If we go back to this framework for a second, if you've just gone through and said, hey, I went through all the sub bullets and I'm getting ready to start the case, I'd say, hey, where my head is at is, I think that this is probably a cost issue related to their facilities. And that's one of the things that I want to test as we go through the areas of investigation. And so the first thing I want to look at is the historical profit information. And so, I've given a hypothesis, but I've also picked a place to go first. But then in between those moments where you're getting the insight, say after this green bar or after this green bar is a great place to revise your hypothesis. Say, you know what, again, just to give you a sense of where my head is at, we just learned this new piece of information that says it's not the factories, it's actually the R&D cost that is causing the cost problem. And that's what I want to drill into more. Okay, boom, we're halfway through the case. You had an original hypothesis, you just revised your hypothesis. I feel like I know what you are wanting to do, and that's awesome. And that's a really high level. Like if you can have a hypothesis and revise it as we go along throughout the case, such that the recommendation is just a formality, that is an elite level tactic that will get you an A plus for sure. What's the best time to apply as an off-cycle hire where there may be the least competition? I don't have a good answer for that. I think there's competition all throughout the year, so I don't think there's any probably best time. Kyle asked me advice for experienced hires. Again, networking, that's an area. Number one, it's a big trend for them hiring experienced hires. Again, coming back to my earlier comments, it's where the world is moving. They are going to be taking more and more lateral hires from other firms. I think it's just a process of persistence. It's a process of knowing that one person that can pull your resume out of there. And I always approach those number one, quality over quantity, and number two, just genuine curiosity about what the job was, because I quite literally I didn't know, and if I was going to do this career, I do want to know what we do. And so it really came from a really genuine place. Any suggestions on getting better at creativity for casing? You know, I think it comes back to like trusting your gut and your instincts, and this is and when I talk about kind of infusing industry lexicon and terminology into the framework, maybe not as creative, right? If we're in the computing industry and we talk about microchips, I don't think that you're Michelangelo out here. But again, in the case, if you can show a little bit of range outside, again, connecting it back to things in the real world, connecting it back to things that you've seen, and finding those elegant solutions, then you'll be doing all right. All right, so I think we're at time. I'll just touch real quick. Amanda put it in the chat. I've cased with hundreds of people on the platform. I love to do cases. I'm super passionate about it. I'm doing one every night this week. Here's my code Mark-Longnegger-10. I think I've got something like 67 reviews on Leland. You can check me out, and hope to work with you someday.